Okay.
Yes. Well, here we are again. This time we have quite a few changes, all of which are very positive. Number one is Rich and Paul's good friend, who is now my good friend, John Keller. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Nancy.
And the really big news is Rich and Paul are actually in Oregon.
We
So
are.
all three of us are sitting somewhere nearby in Oregon, just a screen apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other big news is this podcast is not going to be about Rich and Paul's travels. This is going to be the subject that brought all of us together, and that is death. Now, some people may think that's a real downer. Oh my God, they're going to be talking about dying.
Yeah, stick around.
But you know what? I guarantee you, all of you who are listening, you will die. And maybe you might just be a little curious about changes that are happening in the way we die, especially in Oregon. And so that's why this particular episode is titled How How We Die in Oregon Naturally,
Nah.
because that is the way Oregon is headed. There is a great movement to do death differently, to take the medicalization of death and dying out of the picture, to return to our roots where humanity has always been, and that is taking care of your own right up until the very end, right up until the time you lower them into the ground or you move them into the retort at the crematorium. You are with the person that you love. You're with the person that you care for. No one else is, no stranger is taking over these duties. Now, does it sound daunting? Probably. You're looking at four people who felt that way, but four people who would never have changed the way they participate in death. And we're going to start with Rich and Paul.
Ah, okay.
Wow, thank you for that fabulous background narrative about death care in the modern world. And like you said, this has been going on forever. And in the past 100 years, things have shifted. And so
Well, I
it's,
would just add initially that thank you for reminding us this morning that that's actually what brought us together too, because it is.
Mhm.
And that story is a little outside today's discussion, but
but it was front and foremost, Nancy and John, when we crashed into each other 18 years ago in
Oh,
Bedford, Indiana, and Paul dropped to the ground at the pool and just told me quickly that his former partner, Jim, had died just like 13 months earlier. And my best friend, Dave Bishop, loved him dearly. He had passed about a year prior. So it was through that common thread of death and end of life care that really opened our hearts together. And then obviously we find Nancy. And then, John Keller has been in our life, it feels like forever. And so the thread has really pulled us all together around the topic of death and the joys of life.
well, I really remember very vividly, getting an email from Rich saying, I am very interested in this new profession that I've heard about called a death doula or a death midwife.
Yes.
And I want to know more about that. Will you meet with me and can we discuss this? And so Rich and our good friend, Susan Oppie, met with Rich and had the most fabulous conversation. And I think everybody can gather from that moment on, Rich and Paul have been in my life. And it's been extremely rewarding. And through them, I was introduced to John. And again, the topic of death was what brought us all together. I think that's a really good reminder of how profound relationships deepen when you are either at the moment of birth or at the moment of death. These really momentous occasions, both of which are so impactful in our lives, one of them bringing tremendous joy, and the other bringing profound and deep grief, but not grief in this sad way, particularly. It's this grief of, number one, knowing that it's going to happen to us too. That's always the first thing that comes to our mind
Well,
is
yeah,
that yes, we will also be going through this.
right. And it deepens in intimacy and authenticity. It
Yeah.
is what really can
Mm.
solidify and deepen friendships, familial relationships. Um, it, yeah. So, but I think that would you tell all of us why were you the person that Rich was contacting?
Mhm.
Oh.
What's your spiel?
Well, I went through the death of my parents, and it was a very intentional process. I was new to Buddhism at the time, and Buddhists probably know more about the process of dying than any other group of people on the face of the earth. And I was very curious about how do you approach the death of your parents in particular, because we expect that our parents will die before us. So it's not exactly the same as losing other people in your life. This is something you pretty much know will happen the majority of time. And so, how do you do it mindfully? Well, that part, the part of the death, which by the way, they died 6 weeks apart. So
Wow.
it was a like death by torture,
Wow.
going through this so quickly
Yeah.
in both cases. But what was interesting to me was I was prepared for the dying part. I wasn't prepared for what came after. I wasn't prepared for the body bag. And I found the body bag to be so shocking. It was um, a mind issue of how can we treat a human being with such respect and dignity and authority while they're breathing. And the minute they die, we relegate them to a different status in life, one that requires disposal. And that was where I couldn't come to grips with it in my own mind. And
Mhm.
that's how I eventually came to find out, oh, there's this thing called home funerals. And the minute I heard that word, it was like, oh my God, that's it. Have it at home,
Mm.
be at home, be with them. You don't need intervention from a professional. You have been tending this person's body for some time in many cases. The body has now quit breathing. It's not scary. It has simply quit breathing.
Yeah.
And processes that a body goes through can be learned so that they are not scary. So then I found out, well, I can actually take training in how to do home funerals. So I took the classes,
Hmm.
and that's how it all started. And because this was very new, now this was back about 2005 when I did my classes, and from that point on, have been involved in home funerals. But at the time, this was a very new process in Oregon, and because we were one of the first states to have death with dignity, which is something I feel very proud of, that Oregon has really been at the forefront of this movement to do death in a different way. And so, because there were very few of us, the options for Rich to reach out to people was very narrow. And I just got lucky that he picked my name out of the hat.
But
Oh,
one thing we do all have in common here today is that we all have done, participated in, or initiated and managed, sometimes with help, home funerals.
Yes.
in varying different degrees. And that's the other thing is that, in the coursework that both Nancy and I took, it's like you always follow the lead of the family. It's not a prescription. It is like what works best for you and how to honor your loved one. And so, that was
In support
really
of what they're going to do. You're not
right,
the
right.
doula is not
Doing it all.
yeah.
You're a guide. And Nancy, you've been that person. And I really honor you now that you're working full time. This isn't your big go-to job. However, it is just part of our life thread that we share. And so I'm really,
But
really happy that we're all together to talk about this. And, it began really watching Paul's father then die in 13, and just how the system kind of works, with the traditional medical care and being with him at the end of life. And then, fast forward, uh, within 4 months, both of our mothers died.
a couple years later.
Yes, in 15. So that again was another layer of death care, even though families, and this is, always, this is why death should be talked about. It's like even something as simple with my older sister, just in the desire to anoint mom with oil at the end. And my mother wore all sorts of crazy bad perfume. Um, so these are all little things that are really important to kind of come together. And, in the case of my mom, and then we'll really
How
talk
about
about,
John?
well, we have a Doberman that we also buried that we want to share. But you know, so in negotiating with my family around my mother's death, it was like it's unnecessary to embalm mom. And so it's like these things are so important, and when you're at a funeral home, which most people will quickly call and make that happen,
Mhm.
um, it's like we're not wanting to talk about it. And it is, if nothing else, that was the best thing that we did for my mother, was not to use that invasive procedure of embalming her body and eliminating all those fluids and then pumping them up with bad toxic chemicals. So it's again, uncomfortable conversation, yes. And we did really a most loving thing for my mother, and that was not to subject her through that whole terrible procedure that's unnecessary.
It is so uh, unnatural. There is nothing natural about embalming. And it came about actually because of the Civil War. And
Thank
at
you.
that
Yeah.
time, it was so important. Everyone did home funerals. There was no
Mhm.
funeral home to call.
Yeah.
The whole community would come together. And so when the boys were dying on the fields far away from home, the families were demanding that these bodies be brought back to them so that they could do their tradition. And the only way to get those bodies back so that they would be in some kind of shape to be dealt with was to embalm them. And that's really how it all came about. And it's a long story about how we processed from a very organic, natural process to a very unnatural process that involves the handling of the people you love by people you have never met, by people who don't know your family member. And I'm not taking away from the dedication that funeral homes have.
Right.
Not at all, because those people, for the most part, get into this business for all the right reasons. But the fact of the matter is, they are strangers. They're strangers to you. They're strangers to the family member that you're dealing with, and that's what makes it inauthentic.
Yeah.
So we stepped into a new phase where we thought, oh, what a great idea. We don't have to deal with this. We can turn it over to somebody else to deal with it. And as we began to move away from our connection to death, we began to get more and more and more afraid of dying. That is the nasty, bad result.
Yeah. I
Mm.
totally agree with what you said. So, Nancy, can we just go back memory lane a little bit and take a look at Dino the Doberman?
Oh,
Can I make a
absolutely.
recommendation?
Ah,
Sure.
That we actually talked about John and his mom first and do the dog
Mm.
last,
let's do
because
that.
Okay.
just bring John into the conversation.
People
I think
could,
that's a great idea.
Yeah, but
Sure.
we will. It's a little bit of a teaser. We have
that's good.
on our website. We have a dog video, a
Yes.
dog funeral
And
video.
we don't want people to be crying this early in the podcast because it was like, yes, I agree.
So
Let's
that's a little,
transition.
to
So,
your question, Nancy. That's a little background of the Rich and Paul sort of story on home funerals and some of our recent experiences with our family loved ones that didn't necessarily go through a natural funeral or burial process. But the comparing and the contrasting of the experiences are are that kind of lays it out.
yeah.
And maybe you and John can talk a little bit about your experiences together.
Wow. Yeah. You all inspired me to think differently about this topic, and I'm so grateful for that. And I hope, and in preparing for this conversation, I've thought a lot about, um, being to others in my life what you've been to me, in so many ways, actually, but specifically in this topic of death. My mom died in January of 2023 after about 6 months post diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. It was it was the worst possible thing I could imagine when she was diagnosed. And I remember being a child, and maybe we all have these memories, but one of my earliest memories is brushing my teeth in the apartment we lived in. She was a single mom, and I was maybe 5 years old, and I started to cry. And there was an awareness in that moment that I hadn't had before, and that was that she was going to die. And I don't know where it came from, but I remember brushing my teeth at the bathroom sink, and I started to cry. And my mom came in, and she was wondering what was wrong with me. And I remember saying, "You're going to die." And she says, like, "No, I'm not. I'm fine. But it was the awareness that this person that had been so important to me, that was so important to me,
Yeah.
that I wasn't going to have that person forever. And, some of the thoughts that you all have shared up to this point about how are being kept from the death and dying experience in general. And I hate to, this conversation inevitably will have some generalizations, but my experience was people went to the hospital, and the next thing we knew, we were at their burial, and they were in a casket. We didn't see them, and they were sent down put down in the earth, and there was somebody there, which always felt awkward to me because we weren't religious people. There was someone there from the church. We had a Lutheran heritage, so it was someone from a Lutheran church who was there, said some kind words, and then it was over. And I thought, gosh, with my grandparents and other family members, how strange that was. So as I grew up, that was my experience with death. Dying happened in the hospital. Death happened in the hospital. Um, Thinking in terms of my elderly relatives, and then they were just gone. My mom and I were so close, and we moved back from Denver to Oregon in part because during COVID, I remember having a conversation with my partner, Cara, about the fact that in the next 10 years, I was going to probably lose a lot of people because many of my remaining family members were in their 80s. And so we talked about moving back now at that time in 2022, to just to be with these people, and then to be present as they became sick and then eventually passed. Well, the last person I thought would die would be my mom, because she was so healthy. She was driving, she was mowing her lawn, she was raking leaves in her yard, she was gardening. So this diagnosis of pancreatic cancer came out of nowhere. So fast forwarding now to the experience of her death, it gives you a feeling for how close we were to her, that we literally moved back in great measure to be with her and to support her, because moving her out to Denver wasn't an option. So being an only son, I just felt called to do that. Cara was open to it. Our daughter Marie was open to it, and we're very happy in Portland. It was the right move to make. But the first breakfast we all had together in July of 2022, walking back from the restaurant to our temporary home in Woodland, she expressed that she said that she had this pain in her side. And I thought gallbladder, we just had cream in our coffee and bacon. And by the end of August, we knew that it was not a gallbladder. It was pancreatic cancer. She didn't have any of her affairs in order. She lived as a retired 85-year-old in her own home in McMinnville. She didn't have advance directive. We hadn't talked about how she wanted her that process to look like, to be buried or where to be buried. And so near the end of her life, now we're talking about December. So we've been through a couple of rounds of chemo. We were trying to buy as much time as possible. Just the blessing of Rich and Paul too, of course, but Rich reaching out and starting to ask important questions, having the courage and the caring to ask important questions. And I didn't have answers to those questions. And I was so focused on her, caring for her in the moment, and really I just didn't know what to do. So I didn't deal with it until it became clear that I was going to have to start thinking about it. So we engaged hospice. My mom didn't want to do that. She was brushing her teeth and putting glaucoma drops in her eyes up to the last week of her life. She did not want to give up. She wasn't afraid of death, but she didn't want to die. She wanted to be with all of us for as long as possible. So Rich and Paul were traveling, and it was impossible. International travel, you couldn't possibly be coming back to Oregon to support a close friend. It just didn't make sense. And
I know, and we wanted to be there with you, but
I know if you were in Oregon, you would have been. It was totally.
I know. This was really, the downside of travel is that we just couldn't be at your side and hold you when we wanted to. But, through communications on.
That's right. And you inspired me.
But Nancy enters stage right.
Exactly. And so the
Thank
gift
you.
of that's right. And so, Rich, you both inspired me to think differently. And then you introduced me to Nancy. And thankfully, Nancy was available, during the middle of winter, during the middle of the holidays. And she has a lot of activity in her own private life and professional life.
Yes.
And, death doesn't abide, by a calendar. It's its own process and its own thing, as I found out. So we engaged hospice, by the way, in the Willamette Valley Hospice Group, nonprofit in Salem. Couldn't speak more highly of them. They were amazing, wonderful. But when it came to preparing for what we would do with Mom's body, Mom didn't want to talk about it. And I did ask her, and she said, "You do what you think is right." And then she said, "But maybe just have people bring one rose and leave it at the casket." So Mom at that point still had the idea, or she had the idea, of a more traditional burial that we had experienced through our family's, traditions. But honestly, I could not imagine putting my mom's body in a casket in the earth in a conventional cemetery and having her rest there by herself for eternity, just as a symbol. I couldn't do it. A tombstone, here lies, and nobody near her. And surely I wouldn't plan such a burial for myself. So she would be there for as long as this experience is, alone. And I couldn't bear that. And that really speaks also, that sentiment speaks to how I felt about her dying process. I wanted us to be with her as a family. So we engaged hospice. We recognized the time had come to not go back to any hospitals, that she would die at home. I wasn't working. That was really, thank goodness, right? I didn't have siblings that I had to consider. So when I think about other people's experience, I had you as a support system. I didn't have to negotiate with other family members, and I had time, and I had a supportive partner and a pretty healthy kiddo who was at an age to be engaged, and have this experience with us. So, gosh, there's so much I could talk about. I feel like I'm going to go on for way too
So
long.
I have a suggestion just
Go
because
ahead.
you and Rich, I think, put together some images, just a few images.
Sure, so let's show those.
Maybe this would be, what do you think, Nancy, a good time to share that?
To take a look at
Ne-
Sue.
Never a bad time to share
Sue.
with everybody what it really looks like.
Do you want to
Yeah.
say anything else, Nancy, before just reflecting on what John said from your side of the interaction and friendship that blossomed from that? And then we'll look at some.
Nothing can deepen a relationship more than being with someone when they're in crisis. And by crisis, I don't mean John was not falling apart, but John had a lot on his plate, and he was contending with an experience that he had never been through before.
Mhm.
And this is the only reason why a death doula or a death midwife is a good idea. If you've never been through it before, you just need someone who can ensure that you feel that you're capable of going through this experience in the manner in which you want the experience to be. Because as we've already talked about, this is not cookie cutter. This isn't A, B, C. There's always A, which starts with the death, but all the way to Z, everything is up for grabs. And when you don't know that, and when you don't know what options are available to you, having someone who has been through this before in a capacity that is not emotionally attached. Now, I will say that that is a loaded word, because you become emotionally attached to every home funeral you attend. You can't help it. You are in the milieu of people's most impactful emotions.
It's intimate.
It's so intimate. It is intimate like no other intimacy, birth and death. And yes, that's what I loved about John. John was ready to enter into this experience, and all he needed was just someone to bounce things off of, someone to hold a container, hold the family in a container, and allow them to do this the way they wanted to do it. So,
Can I add one thing? And then I don't want to get
Of course.
bogged down in sort of administrative. But additionally, the doula also provides a comforting framework for what in the state where you might be residing, in our instance, Oregon, about they have a better handle a little bit working with maybe the medical professionals
yes,
about this piece of paper needs to go over here by tomorrow. And so there is some of that, but that obviously it's a very intimate emotional support mechanism as well. But there is that other piece of it. Shall we look at some pictures before we end part one?
yes, let's do.
Okay. Oh, I have to do
Wow,
the,
this
okay,
goes.
wait a minute. They don't see it yet.
Oh
I'm a little
boy,
bit,
here we
bless
go.
my heart.
I know.
try
I keep
so
saying,
hard.
Paul, are you these photos? And he's like, yes, I am.
Okay. So now they see my screen.
All right.
Okay. Now you see John and Sue, right?
Yeah.
This takes us back to 2008. And this is young John and his delightful mother, Sue. And I think this is kind of early when Paul first
Yeah.
got to meet.
That's right.
I think so.
Yeah. So what
sh-
else you got?
So number two,
All right. So
a little later in life.
she is, oh my gosh, the biggest Blazer fan. And so we gifted Sue this Trailblazer gray t-shirt one playoff season, and she was thrilled. Now, John, I must say you were very supportive of us Blazer fans. Thank you very much. Your mother
Yes.
could not stop watching. She loved that game. And, if there's an afterlife, I really hope she gets to see the Trailblazers win another playoff because it's been too damn long. All right. So,
John can also talk about some of these pictures too. If you
yeah.
have any
Yeah.
more.
Go ahead. Good
Okay.
job, brother.
Well, we just returned from Japan, and so we are sporting the mustaches. It didn't frighten your mother, but this is out in front of our place in Northwest Portland. All right, what else do we have? Um, oh, this was our last birthday visit for Sue, and we delivered flowers at her.
And also really poignant. This was a spectacular birthday. We flew out from Denver every year for her birthday and spent a long weekend and brought our daughter Marit. And Marit's good friend who lives in Portland, Lilia, joined us for the weekend. We had a sleepover at Grandma Sue's. And
Oh,
Rich and Paul, you boys came out and surprised us with a visit and brought flowers and a gift.
when was
But
her
that
birthday?
was, you can tell by the background, that's her
Yeah,
house in the background.
yeah.
That was a beautiful weekend. She was
Gloria.
85 years old. She was strong as a horse. She
What
was
day?
March
What
6th. March
March
6th.
6th.
And
Okay.
something else about mom, her life had been really challenging when she was younger. It was hard. There were lots of
Uh-huh.
aspects of it that were hard, but it just kept getting better the older she got, truly. And really, the capstone. We bought this house in McMinnville in 2009, and then my daughter came along in 2014. So that birthday was just a wonderful one, and it turned out to be her last one. So how
Yeah.
spectacular that it was such a beautiful birthday.
Well,
And
look
how
at
could we have
this.
known that she would pass away in
I know. I
January?
know. Now, thank you for sharing this photo of young Sue.
Yep.
Adorable.
Yep. Look at those curls.
Adorable photo. Now talk about this.
It was in December of 2022. And it was around in this era, this time that she had been in denial. She kept thinking that chemo, radiation, that there would be a miracle cure. And it was about this time when she started talking um, about next steps and
Uh-huh.
jewelry and pictures. And so Cara and Marit, it's Cara in the background there, and Marit's mom and my daughter Marit and my mom and I together one weekend. They would come out on weekends. I was staying with my mom full time at that point in McMinnville in her
Uh-huh.
home. So this was just a picture of all of us together. You can see my daughter there, Marit, and this was true throughout. There was
Yeah.
sadness, but she wasn't afraid. She wanted to see grandma throughout this process. She hugged her, she held her, she was playful with her. Um, there was no point that it seemed unhealthy for Marie to have this experience. We had friends who were doubtful and shared comments about, geez, do you think that's appropriate? And I just followed my good sense and decided it was appropriate and Marie could handle it.
Now,
This,
Sue was a big cat lover, and this is her final cat,
yep,
and she's always had one.
that's
Uh,
right. That's Sadie. That's in
yeah,
mom's bedroom. That's little
Sadie.
Sadie. This is
Yeah,
right after Christmas. Mom died on the 13th, and this is, I think, I forget the date of this photograph. I think maybe the first or around there, maybe a little later.
yeah,
Might have been later, actually. And then this is the morning after. Sorry, I see the roses now. This
yeah.
was the day of the home funeral, and that's my mother um, in her bed, covered by a quilt that was made by her mother by hand, Erna Beale,
Oh,
and the
beautiful.
roses in honor of my mom's wish. Um, we had a home funeral on the following Sunday. Mom died on Friday, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at these photographs.
Uh,
We
it's all right.
um, a friend put together a lunch. We had about 20 people over to the house who all came at the last minute. Some people did not want to go visit mom. Ooh, sorry for this background noise. Is that going to be a problem?
No, it's
So far, so good.
It's okay.
Okay. So we, we had a luncheon, home funeral. People who wanted to go into the bedroom and say goodbye to mom or spend some time with her were welcome to do that. And at the front door, there was a bucket of roses that we had purchased from In Cahoots in town.
Yeah.
And we encouraged people to take a rose as they entered the house and take it back to mom's room. And those people who weren't comfortable doing that, my daughter Marie did it for them, so that every person who attended, a rose was placed on their behalf for my mom. And then there were essentially prayer flags that each person could write a note to Grandma Sue on. And we strung a line between two trees. And my daughter Marie and her friend Lilia hung those flags. And Lilia, when she came in through the front door, her parents didn't want to go back to the bedroom, which is the room just to the left in the photograph. But Marie insisted that Lilia go back to the bedroom. And so she took Lilia back with a rose, and Lilia placed the rose on Grandma Sue's body.
But you know, it's just a fabulous tribute, and how just naturally Marit stepped up, and you know, I just love her. She is an amazing little soul. And then,
so we have 2 minutes left in part one of this podcast. This is going to be a two-part podcast.
Here's the
so
teaser.
John, why don't you end with the or do you want to tease it or tell the story? But this is the last image that we captured for your mom's.
Let's have
pictures.
John return and tell the story, the owl story, John.
Yes.
So hang tight, and part two is coming your way, and how to die in Oregon naturally.
And Nancy, do you want to take us out of this, the end of this part one, in the next minute or so, with reflection on your side of the experience?
I am so captivated by John's retelling of this experience, and it confirms everything I truly believe about the importance of engaging mindfully in the death of people that we love. John's authenticity in recounting his experience is so apparent that there is no one who can listen to this story that isn't going to be captivated. Because when we come from our authentic self, it's so attractive. And we don't often get the chance to meet somebody that we don't know in such an authentic and deepened relationship. People are going to remember John's face. People are going to remember John's story. And I think once we hear the story of Dino, the same will be for you guys. It will be a whole different relationship that your audience now has with you.
Yeah.
Yes, you've been talking about this wonderful trip, but there's more to your life than just flitting around the world.
Yeah.
A lot more. And to be continued. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in part two.
Thank you, Nancy. Love you both.
We'll
Part
be
two.
right back. The link is below.